Signs of the times. Though we are to be cautious in making specific predictions about the second coming of Jesus Christ, we are to be alert to certain signs that may signal his imminent return. Here's Gene.
We've emphasized the need for caution when it comes to interpreting Revelation and interpreting current events as being the fulfillment of what we see in the book of Revelation. And as I've said, there are overzealous Christians, sincere, who predict, and it's an embarrassment to the Christian faith, and it's a stumbling block to the world. And I think that one of the areas where it is the most offensive, if I can use that word, is predicting who the Antichrist is. That's been done for 2,000 years, and they're always wrong. Or the mark of the beast, what that is. That's been done for 2,000 years, and they're always wrong. So we've got to be very, very careful. On the other hand, as I've stated in this principle, we need to be alert to the signs of the second coming of Jesus Christ. So I think we can blend caution with being alert. And so we want to take a look at this next event that is described here in the book of Revelation, which John again uses symbolic language, but it's entitled The Notorious Prostitute. We read in Revelation 17:1, "Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls," which we've just looked at in the last principle, the seven bowls, "one of those seven angels came and spoke with me," John said, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the notorious prostitute who is seated on many waters." The question is, what and who is the notorious prostitute? Well, if you read on, I think we have the explanation. It's Babylon the Great. In 17, verse 5, "On her forehead was written," that is, on the forehead of the prostitute was written a name, a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the detestable things of the earth. Now, the next question is, what is Babylon the Great? Well, we read on. In Revelation 17, verse 18, it's called the Great City, Babylon. "And the woman you saw is the great city that has royal power over the kings of the earth." Now, there are some who believe that Babylon here in chapter 17 and 18 represent an ecclesiastical system and a political system that will be destroyed. On the other hand, there are some who believe it's a literal city. And I have to say up front that I favor that interpretation, a literal interpretation. And we read about that, and let me just explain it first of all. Some believe this is a literal reference to Babylon, a great city that was built by Nebuchadnezzar and later captured by the Medo-Persians. And you read about this in Daniel chapter 5. Belshazzar was the emperor of Babylon at that time. And he staged this incredible feast in the city of Babylon. And by the way, the walls around Babylon at that time were 30 feet high, and there were two walls. And there were 100 towers. I mean, this is a huge city. And he feels safe. Even though the Medo-Persians are coming in, he feels safe. And he has thousands of people at this big banquet. Well, what he doesn't realize is that that is the Medo-Persians, blocked up the Euphrates River, which ran under the city. And once they dried it up, they came under the city and into this banquet hall and took all of these people captive. So you have a reference here to a literal city, I believe, going back to Babylon the Great. However, if this is an accurate interpretation that it's a literal city, ancient Babylon will need to be rebuilt before Christ returns to rule and reign on earth. And let me give you the supporting evidence for that. Jeremiah seems to support this conclusion in a rather definitive way in his Old Testament prophecies. And as we'll see, so does John in the book of Revelation here in chapter 17. Let's look at the comparisons. They both describe Babylon as a cup of gold. And let me share with you the references. Jeremiah 51:7, Babylon was a gold cup in the Lord's hand, making the whole earth drunk. The nations drank her wine, therefore the nations go mad. And you can see how that relates to the great prostitute. Revelation 17:4, again a reference to the golden cup. The woman was dressed in purple, that is the great prostitute, which is Babylon, was dressed in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, jewels, and pearls. She had a golden cup in her hand filled with everything detestable and with the impurities of her prostitution. So you can see that Jeremiah and John are describing the same city. I don't think it's an accident. The golden cup, the golden cup. And there's centuries between these writings, these prophecies. Another comparison. They both described Babylon as residing by or dwelling on many waters. And you see that both in Jeremiah and in Revelation. You who reside by abundant water, and other translations say many waters, rich in treasures, your end has come, your life thread is cut. Now, obviously, he's referring here to the Euphrates River, because that's where Babylon was located. But here in Revelation 17:1, many waters. Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and spoke with me. Come, I'll show you the judgment of the notorious prostitute, that is Babylon, the great city, who is seated on what? Many waters. And what are the many waters? Well, John explains that in Revelation 17:15. He, the angel, also said to me, the waters you saw where the prostitute was seated are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. So this describes the incredible power of the city of Babylon in terms of the world, being a world empire. Here's another comparison. And this is very interesting, very interesting. They both prophesied that Babylon would be destroyed suddenly. Keep that in mind, the word suddenly. Jeremiah 51:8, suddenly Babylon fell and was shattered. Wail for her, get balm for her wound, perhaps she can be healed. Now earlier, when the Medo-Persians came in and captured Babylon, they didn't destroy it. They just took it over. In fact, Daniel continued to be very important in Babylonian history. So there's a difference here. The Babylon is referred to here is destroyed suddenly. And look at Revelation 18:8. John says the same thing. In just one day. For this reason, her plagues will come in just one day. One day is sudden. So you have a correlation here. But that never happened. That says that there's a reference to a future Babylon, if indeed this is a correct interpretation. Here's another comparison. They both prophesied that Babylon would never be inhabited. Well, we read, it will never again be inhabited or lived in through all generations. And in Revelation, Babylon, the great city, will be thrown down violently and never be found again. That never happened. That has never happened because Babylon, over the centuries, has been inhabited. So there's something future here. So here's an important observation. What both Jeremiah and John envisioned are almost identical and related to Babylon. However, it is also very significant that certain events have never come to pass, namely here, that it was vacated forever and there was sudden destruction. That's never happened in Babylon. So there's a mix between the literal city of the past and a future city, if indeed this is a correct interpretation. And this raises a personal question that I asked my good friend, Dr. Charles Dyer, who's a scholar and has written incredibly and researched this whole subject. And I actually called him on the phone just recently, and I said, Charlie, if this is a correct perspective, how far along will the rebuilding of Babylon be before the rapture? I know it could happen fast, but to emerge and control the whole world is phenomenal. And here's what Charlie texted me in response to my question. He said, I tend to think it won't take as long as we might think to have Babylon reach the place described in the Bible. Following the rapture and the rearranging of the world order after the collapse of the U.S. and the destruction of Russia, Iran, and Turkey in the battle of Gog and Magog, I could see the Arab countries and the Gulf states uniting for their own protection and to reassert control over the remaining oil monopoly in the world. Much like the rapid rise of Dubai, I could see them declaring Babylon to be their capital and pouring billions of dollars into its rapid rebuilding. And let me just comment. He makes reference to the collapse of the United States. What's going to happen in the United States after the rapture? When great numbers of people are removed, airplanes are falling from the sky. Perhaps the President of the United States at that time will be removed, or a great number of people in power. What happened after the Twin Towers to our economy? Remember that? Just the Twin Towers. The United States, after the rapture, could probably just totally collapse. And that may be why there's no reference to it in the Bible. So that's what he's referring to. Then we have the Battle of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel 38 and 39, where clearly Russia, Iran, and Turkey will be destroyed through God's intervention in protection of Israel. So that leaves the Middle East. And it also leaves the Antichrist, who's over the rebuilt Roman Empire. So there's going to be tremendous power struggle between these two. So what Charlie is saying is the rebuilding of Babylon could take place in a relatively short period of time. I was thinking about Brasilia in Brazil. You know how long it took to begin to build, or really to build it sufficiently that you had inhabitants in that capital city? 41 months in the middle of the jungle of Brazil, when you have all of these resources come together. So Charlie continues in his comment to me, to be all the Bible says it must be, it needs to be recognized as a center of trade and government and have worldwide wealth pouring into its rebuilding. I think, Charlie said, in a very short period of time it could become what the Bible predicts. And then it has almost the entire 7-year tribulation to grow and expand before it's destroyed by the Antichrist just before the second coming. And so the destruction, you see, of Babylon, never to be inhabited again, will take place once that battle takes place. So the next question I need to ask is this: could all of this happen in your lifetime? In my lifetime? Personally, I think it's possible.